Okay, well, excellent, everyone. So thanks for joining us on the call. So the focus of the call today was to have a discussion on transcoding within the LivePeer network. So there's a few different things we wanted to discuss, but one of the key things was basically some of the challenges in running a transcoder within LivePeer, how transcoding is going to evolve coming into Streamflow, and also looking at some of the different dynamics in the network, including price wars in the network, which we've seen on a number of other networks, and also discussing the impacts of, for example, the Telegram bot, which we've seen a lot of people in the community using, which is making people more aware of who's calling their rewards and who's not. So to kick things off, the first thing I'd like to ask is, so to the transcoders that we do have on the call, could you tell us a little bit about yourselves and why you got into transcoding within the LivePeer network? So we might start with Chris Hobcroft.
Yeah, sure. Hi, can everyone hear me?
Yeah, we can.
Yeah, nice. Okay, so I guess for newer members of the community, maybe who don't know, I'll kind of give a background. I guess I started within the LivePeer community about 2 years ago, just after they released the white paper. I think I was one of the active transcoders on day one when the network launched back in April, May last year. So I've kind of I was part of the core team then, and have been transcoding since day one. My latest transcoding node campaign is around video DAC, which is effectively creating an integration between Aragon as a system for running DAOs and LivePeer transcoding and LivePeer delegating. So yeah, that's me. So I'm pretty experienced running transcoding nodes, but also excited and interested to see what we all think about Streamflow coming up.
And Chris, what was the motivation behind doing video DAC? What made you sort of take that approach?
Yeah, sure. So it was cognizant of the fact that when a lot of these, where pretty much all of these transcoding nodes get instantiated, they're largely being controlled by a single private key file, which is kind of largely being controlled by a single person. So any funds that get generated by that node effectively are kind of under the control of a single centralized human. After having spent a bit of time understanding how Aragon works and what they're trying to achieve and the software that they're making, I felt like an interesting idea to integrate Aragon with LivePeer, so that if someone does set up a transcoding node that's backed by a DAO, then it can become much easier to decentralize the control over how the funds that node generates are distributed.
Okay, very cool, very cool. Okay, great. So next we might go to Chris Remus. So could you tell us a little bit about the chain flow transcoder and how you got into it?
Sure. Yeah, I'm Chris and I operate the chain flow transcoder. I've been active since the transcoder set increased from 10 to 15. I think it was September of last year that change happened. I first came across LivePeer, I guess it might have been, seems like a long time, but it might have been 3 years ago. I can't remember, 3 or 2 years ago, when I saw Doug give a talk at, I think it was the first Token Summit in New York. And immediately the use case resonated with me because one of my earlier attempts at a project was becoming the Netflix of Bollywood, Indian content. And that was back in 2007. And among a few other considerations, high, essentially, transcoding and streaming costs really crushed us. So when I, learned about the LivePeer use case and the possibility it had of, making these services more readily available to a wider audience, breaking the somewhat oligopoly held even today, I think, by some of the bigger providers, that resonated quite a bit with me. And then the idea of the uncensorable nature of it, a decentralized streaming solution also resonated quite a bit. So I reconnected with Doug last summer, and I was already part of the Cosmos validator working group. And Doug and I connected a little bit on Cosmos, and at the time, I was looking to start running some other systems, and LivePeer seemed like a good candidate. So I think it was on vacation in the summer last year that I spun up the node and got rolling. And my motivation for doing this is to try and provide what I've been calling a community validator. I'm sorry, not validator, transcoder. And the idea there is that the Chainflow transcoder welcomes everyone, and essentially everyone's treated equally, whether they hold 2.4 LPT or many times more than that. So that's really been what I've been trying to do. I'm also a smaller operator, so I've been trying to also show that smaller operators can run these systems effectively and provide a valuable service to the community as well.
Okay, awesome. And now some of the transcoders we might be a little bit more familiar with. But Rafi, would you mind telling us a little bit about the community node for those that might not be familiar with it? Oh, if you're there, Rafi. If not, is Doug on the Doug? If you're here, would you mind talking a little bit about your transcoder node?
Sure thing. Yeah, I can chime in on the community node and the node that I run as well. So I'm Doug Mechanics, one of the founders of LivePeer. I run a transcoder node. The campaign is called the DOB node. That's my GitHub handle, DOB. My motivation in running it is actually not profit driven. I don't recommend you necessarily stake towards my node and expect a great return. I'm running it solely so that I can be kind of deeply in touch with the experience of operating a transcoding node. So I can be monitoring and watching it to see if there's any crashes, any bugs, any ways we can improve the experience for transcoders on our network. And right now, I think it's interesting, I think we can all acknowledge everyone who's spending their time and energy transcoding is doing a great job of kind of bootstrapping the network and testing the economics and helping to provide feedback to iterate on this software. But it's interesting, we're not actually doing transcoding at scale. We're not deploying significant amounts of hardware that are encoding scaled amounts of video yet, but that's obviously the goal of what we want to get to. And I'm really interested to go through the transitional period where it goes from kind of just running one transcoder node that calls reward each day to actually scaling out hardware behind it for those who are interested to race and compete to encode video that flows through the network. And that's when we'll really see creative setups, creative pricing strategies, people competing for performance, competing on geographic location and footprint. So, really excited to kind of participate in that as well. And then the second node is actually not a node that I run, but it's a community node. Oh, hey, Rafi. So you can go ahead and talk about it.
Yeah. So we created the community node. I thought about it when we allocated 5% of the token at Genesis to an endowment, and that we could pull from 18 months after launch. I was really concerned about how we would fund development and contributions from the community between launch and then, and thinking about how to incentivize people to develop on the network. And so we created the community node with the goal of funding development and contributions towards the core protocol and ways that make it easier for people to participate in the network. So in the past almost year now, we've given over 60 grants to all sorts of things that are centered around making it easier for different stakeholders to participate in the network.
Okay, terrific. All right, everyone. And then so one of the next things I wanted to run through.
Nelson, I was just going to quickly mention there's some other people on the call who may want to talk about the nodes that they're running or may not. So I just wanted to open it up in case anyone else wanted to chime in and share.
Yeah, I can share a little bit. Hey, this is Aaron from Bison Trails. How's it going? And so I guess similar to Chris from Chainflow, I started doing some transcoding work around August, September of last year. You know, I think like the thing that attracted us to LivePeer the most was that it has some pretty clear real world applications in the blockchain space. And so like anything that just, it's like you get it and you get why someone would use it and how it would work. It's really, I think it's good for the space as a whole for adoption to get some of these like early wins. And so that's the biggest attraction that we had. We wrote the like one of the main open source Merkle miners when that was happening. And then our company is really focused on like building easy to deploy infrastructure across a lot of different networks, and LivePeer is one of the ones that we're working with early. So in theory, like you should be able to come to our website in the next like month or two and launch your own transcoder very easily, like one click. And then sort of on the other side of things, we're working with the team and thinking about how to get GPUs on the network as like Streamflow goes live and trying to like build capacity into that. I also happen to run a proof of work mine in Oregon that is unrelated to our company, but we do host a lot of GPUs, and I actually have a to-do to give Eric access to one of our machines so that he can mess around with some of our rigs. And yeah, I'm just looking forward to like private pooling, public pooling around transcoding in general. So yeah.
Thank you. Appreciate the support on testing the GPU integrations.
Okay, thanks, Aaron. Sorry, I didn't see you there. All right, great. Is there any other transcoders on the call? Okay, great. All right, so the next question I wanted to go through was a bit of a general question. So what are some of the key challenges you face in being transcoders today? And what are some of the problems you see with LivePeer as it is today, more generally? So Chris, would you like to kick it off again? Sorry, Chris Hopcroft.
Yeah, sure. I guess when I look at transcoding, I think maybe one of the issues right now that I feel is kind of like holding the project back is this limit of 25. That there's kind of like quite still a financial barrier to entry in terms of staking to get into the active set. Of course, I'm aware that the Streamflow update is seeking to kind of scale this out. So that's kind of not something I'm so worried about in the longer term. I guess the biggest challenge for me is just kind of thinking about when, being ready for when Streamflow arrives and knowing what changes are going to need to be made and how things are going to need to evolve in terms of infrastructure setup and security to be able to kind of manage these changes coming in. So like I don't know what the latest is in terms of timing when these things are gonna drop, but I think that's probably the kind of the biggest challenge from my perspective is like accessibility for new people starting, and also awareness of what happens next.
Yeah, okay. Did anyone else want to chime in on that or have any other questions?
I mean, I'm happy to like give thoughts on that. I think, you know, the 25 and sort of some of the consolidation of stake is like a short-term problem that I'm personally like not that concerned with. I think the dynamics of the network once transcoding is live and that there's actual like LPT to ETH payments occurring, like there's some value being accrued through orchestrating jobs, is going to be the thing that like should level set. And so like my bigger concern is around access to transcoding hardware, like how I don't know, like how are people going to build partnerships with transcoding farms or, GPU mining farms? Like how is, a staking person with hundreds of thousands of LPT going to back that up properly? And I imagine it will distribute more, and it should, but there's also very large miners out there, and we're not one of them, but like there's ones that are huge, and like if there's money to be made, like they'll, so I wonder about that, like how the network dynamics change once usage increase, Streamflow goes live, and all of that.
Yeah, one interesting metric that I personally picked up in the last week was over 50% of all staked LPT is currently staked with the top 3 transcoders, which is a little bit alarming. But it's interesting even today noticing I believe the second transcoder didn't call reward, and a number of people changed delegations. So it's interesting seeing the dynamics of some of the price cuts that have been happening in the network, combined with increased transparency from the Telegram bot, is making people a lot more active, which is a bit of a balancing act.
And you have to imagine that like people will not be able to get away with such low fees once they actually have to provide work. And so it's almost like a short-term arbitrage situation where they figure they can try to build as much stake as possible while it's really, really cheap, and then they'll raise the fees later when you actually have to do work. And so, yeah, and like obviously they're not paying attention well enough. There was like a big update that you needed to do to get it to work, and it isn't, even though most of the time you can just like leave it, it isn't a thing that you can just ignore.
Mm-hmm. Okay, great.
Yeah, it'll be interesting to see how much the kind of fees will need to be ratcheted up in order to offset the cost of doing the actual work versus what the kind of inflationary gain that you're keeping through the reward cut can be used to offset the cost of work. So it's interesting to think about a network in which the fees for using the network are really, really low in the early days in order to actually attract demand and create a lot of usage and then get people to try out LivePeer, knowing that you can use a reward cut to actually earn LPT to cover some of those costs. And then as you actually have to scale up more and more hardware, and that incurs more cost, then you probably do have to shift over more towards a fee structure. But I think it's a nice kind of bootstrapping mechanism that we can use in the early days of Streamflow to make it really attractive for applications and video developers to try the network at a low price.
Okay, great. And another question related to that was, so what impact does everyone think increasing the 25 transcoder cap will have on the network?
Yeah, I think, and that comes back. I had a couple points on that last question.
Okay. Yeah.
I was hoping to hit. One, I've been thinking a lot about the centralization of stake on LivePeer and other networks, but I feel like that's probably a conversation that could take up its own session, so I won't dive too far down into that. But I do see that the centralization of stake among a small number of really large holders is somewhat, against the spirit of what I hope that we're all trying to build here. I guess I'll just leave it at that. And I know that, Streamflow will help mitigate that. And there are a lot of people thinking about it, throughout the community in different projects. So, I'm hoping that once staking evolves, then, that may become less apparent. But right now it seems to be happening pretty fast on, the 3 networks that are more or less live. And I think that, it's troubling, especially for me as a smaller operator. And then particular to smaller operators, I think for me, visibility is tough because, in the time I can spend operating the transcoder, I feel like my time is best spent making sure I'm running it and running it well. And, as Aaron referenced, there's an upgrade that was necessary yesterday, and that took up any time I could allocate to running the transcoder. So in terms of marketing, that comes last for me. So visibility has been a challenge. And then in addition to that, I think educating delegators that things other than, how much stake someone holds matters, I think. So for example, I think the called rewards metric on the dashboard went a long way in educating potential delegators to some of the other things that matter in these networks. But I think that'll become increasingly important, especially as maybe people start to get into it that may not be interested in learning as much. I just think that helping delegators really understand what's important when selecting a transcoder will become increasingly important as time goes on. And that will also help mitigate the trend of stake re-centralizing. And then I think,
Okay.
and then I forgot about that part. And then coming into your next question. So I think increasing from 25 will, only exacerbate the problem of visibility. So I think it'll make that part of, my operation more difficult. I think it'll make it harder for me to let people know why I'm here and why I'm doing this. So I see that as one direct effect of increasing the number higher than where it is today. At the same time, I support that though.
Okay, great. So we've just had another transcoder join us. So welcome, Quan. So the question we were just running through. What we might do. Would you like to introduce yourself and your involvement sort of in LivePeer?
Sure. Yeah, Quan. We are a small team working on this product called Scout, basically providing data analytics for Ethereum-based blockchain protocols. Right now, LivePeer is our customer. We're also working with Aragon. So yeah, that's what we do. A simplified way to discuss us is more like Google Analytics for blockchain protocols. That's how we do.
Okay, great. And what would you say your goals are in sort of the LivePeer ecosystem?
My goal, I mean, we only do one thing, which is providing data intelligence. So we know it's costly, time consuming to do it well, to do it at a scale. So all we do is want providing data transparency to everyone in the community.
Hey,
Okay,
Quan.
great.
Yeah, I was also going to say, I think it's important for people to recognize that the node that you're running right now, that kind of is the way that the LivePeer ecosystem helps fund the development of Scout and kind of rewards you guys for like the tool that you're building for the ecosystem as well.
Absolutely, yes. We were very fortunate to be able to join a community at a very early time, and then I think Doug and Eric basically thinking it could be a very useful piece for the community. So they proposed the idea of running a transcoder to fund this operation, and it's been working really well for us.
Okay, great. All right. So, Quan, the question we were just going through was, how does everyone think increasing the 25 cap of transcoders will impact the network? So, would you have anything to add on that one?
Not at this moment. I would just listen in first.
Okay, cool. All right, great. Okay, so yeah. So Aaron, would you like to have a go at answering that one?
I mean, I don't really know what will happen, but I mean, to me, I'm not. I guess it doesn't. I'm not super like concerned with that. I'm much more concerned about like 6 months from now, or like when the usage starts and the dynamics of that play out. I think adding more people, like adding more transcoders right now, will just put some more transcoders with lower stake that call reward. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. Okay, great. So unless anyone else had anything they want to add to that,
yeah,
so,
like, I want to talk about this. Like I think Aaron's right. No one knows what actually is going to happen. I guess when I think about reducing the barriers to entry for kind of coming into the active set of transcoders, I think about two kind of sets of people. One would be just like individuals who don't have access to huge amounts of kind of physical hardware, who for whom it's now much easier to kind of like try out being a transcoder, maybe run up some VPSs on Amazon, or maybe run something off their local machines. So I think the fact that it would kind of lower the barrier to entry in terms of stake, I think will open up open up opportunities for people all over the world to kind of start participating. I know we have kind of quite an active transcoder based in Indonesia, but also just like how will this opening up and reducing the barriers to entry result in more breadth and kind of global footprint of live peer. And I think the second one that's interesting and kind of often talked about when discussing Streamflow is the impact it might have on mining farms, and the opportunity for someone who's running mining operations to start to launch multiple nodes across their infrastructure estate. So for me, it's super exciting to see how it could potentially result in a kind of an explosion in supply of transcoding capacity. Obviously, then we need to think about how the demand for transcoding capacity can kind of start putting that supply to good work. But those are the two areas that I think about when I think about kind of opening all this up.
Yeah, I'll just add that I like that view, which is like after Streamflow adding more. I think it'll be interesting to see if it causes a redistribution of stake based on transcoding behavior, like not just calling reward behavior.
Yeah, I'd like to comment on that as well. I completely agree with Chris and Aaron. And one more thing I would like to add is that, I mean, at this point, I think the LivePeer team probably has the most information, most insights to look at the network and to say, is this a good time to add more transcoder or not? One thing I would we're thinking is, if we add another, let's say 5 to 10 transcoder, what other potential experiments we can do? If there's upside for adding these things, let's say experimenting something new, I think it's actually worth increasing the number. But if there's no upside here, probably I think I'm more in line with Chris and Aaron that keep the same number. That's just my 2 cents.
Okay, great. So Doug, would you like to add any thoughts about that and what you think that process would look like, and how the team's thinking about increasing that number?
Sure. So the top priority for the team is to actually deliver on Streamflow, because we're not necessarily focused on how do we short-term optimize around people calling reward each day and kind of earning inflation, but instead we're focused on how can we actually deliver like real world impact and disruption through this open infrastructure network. And that's the Streamflow proposal and all the work we've been doing to run at that. So, if you were to ask for my kind of recommendation on increasing the number of transcoders, it would be, let's get to Streamflow as quick as possible, right? Let's get to a test net where everyone here can start running kind of the new Streamflow enabled node and start experimenting with transcoder hardware behind it, even if it's just another transcoder process on the same machine or on a one separate CPU machine. Let's unlock the GPU mining opportunity, and then as soon as we are ready to move that from testnet to mainnet, I think that's when you'll see an order of magnitude scale increase, rather than thinking about kind of a short-term addition of 5 or 10 more transcoders. I think, as Quan was saying, if there's some big experiment or there's some really important new thing we could learn from that, then the community should consider it. But nothing jumps to mind as to what that would be. I think everyone, their energy is best spent node and helping to get Streamflow ready to go live.
If I can chime in on that, I kind of agree. Like, we've only just gone from 15 to 25, so we might not want to increase that again in the short term. I guess when I think about what opportunities that presents when we increase the numbers is it just brings more humans who are interested in running video transcoding infrastructure into the live peer community and getting them somehow kind of invested, whether it's emotionally, whether it's with some live peer tokens that they've received as reward. Just like the more humans who are enthused about this concept, the better that we can get kind of holding a stake, even if it's just a few tens of tokens. I think is really cool. Just like I've seen a few people like J1V coming into the community and starting to kind of test and learn how all this stuff works, build up a bit of stake even with a really low reward cut. Yeah, it's just good energy to keep the community fresh. But I agree, the now 25 feels good.
Yeah, I guess if I could add to that, I guess one positive thing from the price wars we've seen is it's a function of new people joining the community and wanting to get involved and actually competing to be in that 25. So I think it's like positive that there are these transcoders that are looking to get involved and are excited to participate. But yeah, no, I agree that I think Streamflow is a key priority. Okay, great. Well, look, that kind of ties into the next thing I want to go into, which was basically, so how does everyone sort of think the transition to Streamflow will impact transcoders, and how are you also thinking about your current operations and how that will scale, or what that will mean for how you do things today and how you need to transition going forward?
I can start.
Mhm.
Yeah, I think the first thing that comes to mind is it's going to make transcoding a lot harder than it is today. I think Aaron referenced it. I mean, we'll get back to, we'll start to have to actually run services that, are either supporting transcoding by running the orchestrator or actually doing the work by running the transcoders, or doing both if we run both. And I think that'll be significantly different than the operations required to run the transcoder today. So I think for me, at least, I'm thinking of, a complete overhaul of, what I've built and, what I'll need in order to support Streamflow, and whether I can, actually afford to run an orchestrator and transcoders, or, whether my attention is best spent running an orchestrator, which is where I'm leaning today. And then, and then serving real-time video is a pretty big job and a very unforgiving job. So I think, it's going to get a lot harder, and there are going to be a lot of operational considerations that need to be addressed.
Yeah. Okay. Chris Hobcroft, would you like to have a go at that one as well?
Yeah, sure. I think what I'm most interested in doing is just like learning how to be an orchestrator. It's a new role in this ecosystem that I don't have any experience of. I'm going to be interested to see kind of when this testnet that Doug's talking about kind of ramps up, how we can participate in like helping run that and start to kind of learn by doing. Like a lot of the stuff I did with transcoding has just come from running the software and learning how to operate it. And yeah, I guess I'm interested to know what the implications are and what the responsibilities are going to be on these orchestrators. So, and learning by doing. So, I feel as well that, like, I agree with Chris Remus that it's going to become a more complicated thing, but then there's also the potential that it could also, in some ways, become simpler, because there's kind of like this orchestrator transcoder split, and Philippe Angelet's design of how that's kind of all going to work. So I'm going to be really interested to see how it plays out. Don't know if that is a fully fledged answer to your question, Nelson.
No, I think that's a fair answer. Okay, Aaron, would you like to have a go at that one? Oh, sorry, you go, Doug.
Oh yeah, well, I was actually gonna just chime in with some advice related to something Aaron shared before. So obviously, looking forward to the test net will be the milestone when everyone can start learning and experimenting and trying out how to play these roles. One thing that might be helpful to clarify is that, you know, being an orchestrator in StreamFlow is going to be really similar in many ways to being a transcoder today. It's, you know, keeping the node process running around the clock on reward every day, ensuring that you're interacting with the protocol in the right way. But the thing is, you'll need to have some relationship, either trusted or trustless, with actual transcoders or transcode hardware out there. And you know, that means you can run your own transcoders, you know, on the same machine, on additional, you know, CPU machines or cloud instances if you want. Or, you know, the most cost-effective thing we believe will be to have some relationship with GPU miners. And so if the idea is that you only want to run an orchestrator and don't want to run any GPUs or any additional hardware, one thing you might want to be doing sooner rather than later is kind of developing a relationship with GPU miners who may be kind of your backing hardware operator. And that would be like the trusted way. And then the trustless way would be this concept of kind of a public transcode pool that comes with some, you know, additional validation overhead, and that's kind of an unsolved research problem. But that's an interesting topic some people in the community are thinking about as well.
And Doug, when you think about your own sort of transcoding, would you see yourself becoming an orchestrator, or how do you think about that?
I'm interested in playing both roles so that, again, I can just like learn and kind of be in touch with what's required to play those roles and operate them and get firsthand experience being an operator in the network. But I think I will very quickly get overshadowed by the competitive operators who have significant resources, who are geographically distributed, and can, you know, win the races to perform the best for real user demand. And that's okay with me. So doing it to learn, not necessarily doing it to win.
Okay, and Rafi, when thinking about the community node, how do you sort of think about StreamFlow?
I haven't thought about whether we're going to actually, if it's possible to just continue to build up inflation with live peer token and not actually transcode video, because it's not kind of the core function that I think the node needs to be really good at. So I'm not sure if it's possible to just focus on building up inflation and not actually transcode video, but and same. Yeah, so I'm not sure. I haven't thought about it that much yet.
Okay. And Aaron, yeah, did you have any points you'd like to add to that?
No, I mean, I think Doug summed it up pretty well. I mean, what we'll probably do is we'll start by backing our orchestrator with our own GPU hardware because we just happen to have it. And, but, you know, I imagine as like the video transcoded per live peer staked increases, we'll either have to, you know, we'll have to find other people. And if it's not a focus for our business, like we'll probably just wind up being like a smaller, similar to like a community node transcoder, where like the competitive folks, if you can offer really cheap transcoding services, like they're just going to win everything, and if they're distributed, and that's okay too. But we'll just see how it goes and see how profitable it is and see, yeah.
Yeah, I'm very much in line with Aaron. You know, our main business is providing data intelligence product, and you know, running video transcoder is definitely not our strongest strengths. So we're gonna, you know, play by ear, see what we can do, and likely we just become a very, you know, small node in the network.
Okay, great. And yeah, so I guess tying to this as well. So as the network begins to see adoption and paid transcoding jobs on the network, how do we think this will impact the change in demands for transcoders and orchestrators? Yeah, sorry, I was just reading the chat. So I guess that's kind of tied to what we were just talking about, which is basically, I think the consensus is a lot of people on the call feel that the network's going to become far more competitive, and the people that are playing that role of transcoder in the network will probably evolve. So anyway, we'll go through this question. So I think we did talk about this last week, Doug. But what is someone's just asking, what is the approximate timeline for Streamflow to go to testnet, and then when are you sort of estimating for the mainnet?
Sure. We've recently kind of closed some of the tough open research problems that needed to kind of be wrapped up in order to kind of continue the development of Streamflow. So that's a pretty good milestone, and we're targeting kind of late May for when we want to be ready to launch a testnet, essentially. Mainnet, follows the successful operation of the testnet, but you can't put a date on it until you kind of iterate and confirm that things are working as expected. So that's late next month. So we're working towards that goal.
Okay, great. And now just to sort of open it up to everyone, did anyone have any general questions about transcoding or even about LivePeer and Streamflow?
I've got a question. It's an interesting pointer that Doug gave around building connections into existing mining operations. Are there any other interesting pointers that the core team can communicate out to community around some of the things that they think we could be doing to prepare to maximize the chances of LivePeer successes in the future? More of a question than a comment.
Yeah, Doug, did you have anything to add to that one?
I think, I think there's a lot that we can all do to contribute to this success prior to a testnet being launched, where everyone can contribute by, running the software, giving the feedback, finding the bugs, etc. The main thing right now is to help with building out some of the kind of more distributed or more unique implementation pieces of Streamflow. So for example, the GPU integrations, Aaron mentioned that they're helping out with that. That's great. That'll be, we'll be able to test a certain set of GPUs with the software and make sure it works and learn how that works. But if someone does have even GPU hardware and wants to transcode and orchestrate on the network, they should get involved sooner rather than later with some of the core development and testing, building out the right tools to make sure that those GPUs can dual mine cryptocurrency and transcode video at the same time with their setup. So that's kind of on the building side. And then one thing that's really important to just recognize is, and it's a little early to kind of focus on taking the right steps here, but Streamflow alone doesn't mean scaled usage of this network. There still needs to be, products that want to use LivePeer, whether they're existing products or new decentralized applications that want to use LivePeer and take advantage of this cheap transcoding. So part of this is kind of a traditional business development and awareness and marketing and letting it be known. But the other thing is, maybe if people are building applications and have visions for interesting video applications that can leverage that need transcoding, they could serve as really nice test cases, as demonstration apps. They can actually be great standalone products. They grow into cool things of their own. And so certainly if people in the community are interested in some of the more productized areas of video, whether it's consumer hacking on live peer, and kind of being part of the development experience is another great way to ensure that there'll be great case studies, great stories around the network in the early days that we can use to like bring a lot more demand onto the network later.
Okay, cool. Okay, and did anyone have any other questions?
I just want to comment on what Doug just said. I think the second point he brought up was super useful, which was in the traditional like startup world. This is sort of like the go-to-market strategy, which I think is as soon as you have this technology product reach a minimal viable product stage, next big thing is how to get customers to use it. Because without customers running Transcoder or whatever it is, it's like it doesn't really mean anything. So I think as one of the community members, I think we will definitely think very hard about how do we bring real use. I know there's real use case, but how do we bring large number of user, especially existing video platform or emerging video platform that can leverage the unique technology that IPA built to actually build something on the consumer level, something wasn't possible before, actually.
Yeah, I think just to chime in on that, it's particularly interesting given in light of PewDiePie, I can never know how to pronounce his name, but this news about how he's switching from YouTube to DLive, and we've often kind of talked of as DLive as being a great example of a potential user of live peer for transcoding, and just interesting how it's kind of seems to be edging in the direction of this wonderful blockchain world.
Yeah, no, I did see that. That was very interesting. Yeah, okay. So I think that's all I had on that, unless anyone had any other questions. So Doug, did you want to give any sort of general updates?
General updates. So personally, I just got off a plane back from NAB, the biggest video industry trade show conference. It was the whole video industry was there, ranging from cameras and lighting and equipment to production tools to, of course, streaming and transcoding companies that we were most interested in talking to. There's over 1,000 exhibiting vendors, and we went around telling the live peer story to anyone who is basically had to scale infrastructure in order to run transcoding, not to try and sell it to anyone, because we haven't really reached minimum viable product stage at scale yet. That's what Streamflow is about. So not trying to sell it to them, but to make them aware of this really interesting disruptive technology that we're running at, which will create far more reliability and kind of geographic distribution than what they're accessing through single providers, as well as huge cost efficiencies as well. And the story was understood and it was received really well, but it had nothing at all to do with blockchain or cryptocurrency or even decentralization. The video industry isn't really there connecting with that yet, but they connected immediately to the idea that there's all of this unused video encoding capacity in these crypto mining rigs around the world. And that if we can harness that, that's hugely relevant and disruptive to their business. So really good feedback on that side, but also crystal clear. There's so many mature platforms out there. There's so many end-to-end solutions that, present solutions to the problems that the industry thinks that they have. And so really until we can demonstrate that this is working, that these theses are confirmed, that this network works with scale at low price and high reliability, it's only at that point when kind of the big existing industry and kind of take the next step of trying it, evaluating it, running it alongside, and eventually using it as their solution. So again, that just shines a really clear focus for me on shipping Streamflow a GPU miner opportunity and ensuring that this network is as reliable as the status quo at the minimum with cost improvements. So those are the goals. That's what we're running at. I think as a whole community, we should prioritize those things.
Okay, excellent. That's really awesome to hear. And I guess at this stage, Doug, do you feel that adoption will come from integrating with sort of crypto-focused dApps, or do you see it more in traditional sort of companies?
Well, it's both, because it's an open platform and it's an open protocol, and I'm really excited about what the crypto-enabled kind of decentralized applications can create that was never necessarily possible before. But if you're looking for scaled adoption, none of those crypto enabled products exist yet or at kind of large scale. And so I think you'll see a lot of the early scaled usage coming from the other side, from traditional industry. It doesn't mean it's enterprises can be great, applications with user-generated content where many hundreds or thousands of people are streaming video, creating content. But that's where a lot of the scale is, and so that's where a lot of the benefits of this network, which is all about increasing your reliability and reducing your cost at scale, will come from. So I think both are great and addressable, but I think you'll see scale more on the existing applications first.
Okay, excellent. All right, so that's all I had to go through for this call. Did anyone have any sort of general questions or comments?
I had one question for some of the transcoders who are also running validators in Tezos or Cosmos. I know we're running out of time here, but are there any major lessons we can learn from what's happened in the early days of those validator communities that we can learn from and either consider for LivePeer, or lessons to learn and avoid within the LivePeer ecosystem?
I think, speaking as one of the Cosmos validators, one of the things that's become apparent, in addition to the rapid centralization of the stake, is, putting that aside, though, the other thing that is becoming apparent is that the number of, I guess, what people are calling serious and capable operators seems to be pretty small. It took a while for Cosmos to fill up the 100 slots. Within those 100 slots, I think it's still yet to be seen, how many will stay around for the long haul. So my sense is once, Streamflow launches and the requirements to operate, increase, that, we'll have to keep an eye to make sure that, there are enough operators and enough interested operators out there to support the network. Of course, that will scale with demand, and hopefully, once LivePeer scales and, adoption picks up, there'll be enough people to actually support it. So I guess what I'm saying is, we shouldn't take for granted that there are enough capable operators out there to support the network, especially as the network grows. So recruiting more, earlier, with, the right intentions, I think could be something worth keeping in the back of our minds.
Yeah, that's great. One thing I noticed about that community is a high emphasis on security of your node operations, from the very first test nets all the way up through the production launch. And that's it's obviously important for anyone with a hot wallet with a signing key to make sure their setup is secure here, but it's not necessarily the thing this community has emphasized first and foremost in their node operations, because we can do this delegated kind of staking to kind of reduce the risk of the nodes. But I do think that's going to be something that becomes more and more important as there's more real value flowing through LivePeer network.
Yeah, that is a good point. Now that you bring that up too, yeah, the focus on security has been really strong since the beginning. And when we did the game of stakes, which was an adversarial testnet. I think a lot of people were woken up by the possibility that their systems could get hacked or taken down in various ways. So yeah, I think it's a good point to start emphasizing that, moving into, the next generation of the production network will be important as well.
Okay. Well, thanks for those comments, guys. So thanks for joining, everyone. And yeah, we'll speak to you on the next community call.
Thanks for
Thanks for
organizing
having us.
this, Nelson.
Yeah, thanks, Nelson. And well
No
done
worries,
to the
guys.
team.
Thanks, everyone. See you later.